So, good afternoon and welcome. I'm Lynn Carlson, and I'm the chair of the board of the Women's Fund Board of Directors. It is great to see so many members here this afternoon and so many guests that are here to support the agencies and the people that we're going to meet on the stage this afternoon. You know, from its very beginnings, the Women's Fund has empowered women to make some of the critical, difficult decisions about how our pooled resources are going to be distributed in the community. And we've also provided opportunities for our donors, our members, to learn more about the impact that our grants are making in the community. Now, some of those opportunities come in the form of site visits. So that would be visits to individual agencies to see firsthand our dollars at work. And some of those opportunities come like this afternoon's forum, where we get to have the opportunity to hear from multiple experts about how a critical issue is affecting our community and how our grants are making a difference. There are so many things that I love about the Women's Fund, but I think this opportunity to learn more about the impact of our grants, how we are changing lives together, that's one of the best. So let's get started. And I would like to introduce Janessa Van Vechten, one of the Women's Fund volunteers who's made this afternoon possible. So welcome, Janessa.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Women's Fund's Grants in Action Educational Forum on Homelessness, Connecting with Compassion. I'm Janessa Van Vechten, a new Women's Fund member and a member of the planning team for this forum. Today, we are fortunate to hear from some of the most preeminent people and organizations working to address the critical issue of homelessness in our community. As Women's Fund members, you have directly supported this work, and today you will have the opportunity to go beyond simply the numbers and statistics that define homelessness. Today, you will hear from the practitioners, those who work directly with people who are experiencing homelessness. You will hear about the work of each of the 3 Women's Fund grantees, Channel Islands YMCA, Dignity Moves, and Santa Barbara Alliance for Community Transformation, SB Act. I want to call your attention quickly to the note card that each of you should have received upon entering. We invite you to write down any questions you may have on this note card, and we will collect them after all 3 organizations have presented. Some of your questions will be included in our Q&A session at the end of the presentation. Before we hear from these remarkable organizations, it is my great pleasure to introduce you to our keynote speaker. Silvia Barnard has served as the executive director of the Good Samaritan Shelter for the last 25 years. Under her leadership, Good Samaritan Shelter has become the largest homeless shelter provider on the Central Coast. Silvia leads Good Samaritan's holistic approach to providing people with services at over 25 locations countywide. During the pandemic, Silvia has been able to lead Good Samaritan Shelter not only to maintain existing services, but to expand. Silvia currently serves on several boards and committees, including as chair of the Santa Barbara County Continuum of Care, co-chair of the Community-Based Organization Coalition, board member for the Santa Barbara County Public Health Federally Qualified Health Centers, founding member of the Santa Barbara County Reentry Steering Committee, and as board director for the Housing Trust Fund. She has also been elected to the Santa Barbara County Community Corrections Partnership Board. Please join me in warmly welcoming Silvia Barnard.
Well, that sounded impressive. I don't know who that person is. And for the record, I started when I was 10 at Good Samaritan. I've actually worked half my life at Good Samaritan, and I wouldn't change it for a minute. So next slide. So our mission at Good Samaritan Shelter is to provide emergency, transitional, and affordable housing with support services for the homeless and those in recovery throughout Santa Barbara County and the Central Coast. Next slide. So one of the things I want to go over is a little bit about the overall system, is that shelter is not enough, outreach is not enough, housing is not enough, but it's an entire system that makes the system work, in essence. So in order to get someone out of homelessness, it's not as easy as just giving them food and shelter. Good Samaritan has over 600 beds under roof. We operate in both Santa Barbara and San Luis Obispo County. We started 36 years ago as a rotating shelter, and at that time, the board decided that they wanted to create a 28-bed shelter, and that's when they stopped rotating the shelters out and they started with a 28-bed shelter. Our board, way back then, realized that food and shelter was not enough, that in order to help someone get out of homelessness, you have to really address the root causes. And so the root causes of homelessness included drug and alcohol treatment, mental health services, transportation, respite care, medical services, treatment in both residential, outpatient, sobering centers, case management, rapid rehousing outreach, permanent supportive housing, and we even have an after-school program for homeless children in our Santa Maria campus. And in North County, we really developed our own system of care because we didn't have any other agencies that were able to step up. So in 2020 is when we expanded our services to Santa Barbara. And in Santa Barbara, in January 2020, our first program here in Santa Barbara was our step-down housing program. And it is a partnership with Santa Barbara County Behavioral Wellness and Santa Barbara County Public Defender's Office. And through Board of Corrections funding, we opened a 20 beds in 4 different homes that are all co-located at the same site, master leased through the Santa Barbara City Housing Authority of Santa Barbara. The program has been incredibly successful, and individuals can stay there, both males and females, for up to 6 to 12 months. One house is for females and the other 3 are for males. And it's also a diversion program. Instead of people being able to do jail time that are experiencing homelessness or criminally justice involved, that they are able to be in the program and then be able to attend programs and treatment as well. In February 2020, we opened up the Credo 47 Stabilization Center, which is known as the Sobering Center. It's a 10-bed facility, and then to our surprise, 3 weeks later, the pandemic hit. And that project is also funded through Behavioral Wellness and Prop 47. And so in the process of that, we chose not to close. We did not close one of our programs at all during the time of the pandemic. We worked closely with the jail and law enforcement to be able to take individuals coming out of jail that were experiencing homelessness or needing stabilization, preventing them from going, and then our biggest referral source is Cottage Hospital. As you can imagine, when people are under the influence, they need somewhere for them to be safe. And our programs are staffed with medical staff and drug and alcohol experts as well in that program. So we also, in Santa Barbara County, it's difficult to be able to access services. As far as treatment, you have to call an access line. And so our staff are able to facilitate that, get people to treatment, and we actually transport them and do a warm handoff. So after operating for about a year, we realized that in looking at the data that 80% of the clients being served in that program were homeless. That program is open to anyone in the community. And so with that data, we worked in partnership with Santa Barbara County to be able to get funding to open a 7-bed one up in Santa Maria. In 2020, we started a new program that was funded by the County of Santa Barbara called Emergency Housing Voucher Support Services. Both of the housing authorities received large amount, 200 plus emergency housing vouchers. And these vouchers were given to individuals at the top of the list that were able to use the vouchers to get subsidized housing and move from homelessness into housing. But the 2 housing authorities actually incredibly went to the county and said, you know, us giving out the vouchers is not enough. We can't provide the support that individuals need to be able to retain that housing. And so the county, Santa Barbara County, put up for RFP $1 million a year for 2 years to be able to keep people in housing and provide the support services where they're at. And these are individuals that have been unsheltered, chronically homeless, on the streets. There were several families that were involved. And so we were awarded the grant, and we created a multidisciplinary team. And the team consists of 2 nurses. It consists of mental health practitioners that can provide therapy. We have a drug and alcohol counselor. We have case managers. We have landlord liaisons. And incredibly, since September of 2021, we've served 337 clients in that program, with 98% of them retaining their housing during that entire time. And it's been a model program nationwide. Actually, Rob Pearson's here, but I believe it's top 10 in the nation for the outcomes on emergency housing vouchers. Unfortunately, during that process, we had 10 individuals that passed away in their homes. It's a reminder that the individuals that we serve are really medically fragile and have numerous issues, and so at least that they had the dignity to be able to pass away in their home, and they were housed and they weren't on the streets. In November 2022, Good Sam took over the Freedom Warming Centers from the Unitarian Church here, Society, and so we are operating those countywide. We triggered this last week, we'll trigger next week, but we're operating the ones all the way throughout the county, including Santa Barbara at this time. And then in July 2022, we started the countywide homeless outreach grant that includes in Santa Barbara. And then of course in August 2022, we opened up the Dignity Moves Santa Barbara project as the operator. That project is in partnerships with Dignity Moves, which you'll hear from in a little bit, and the County of Santa Barbara. The program has 34 individual units that provide bridge housing for unsheltered individuals within Santa Barbara downtown mapped area. We did outreach for about 4 months prior and really kind of built that trust and relationship with those individuals. So when it was time to come in, we gave them formal invitations, we picked them up, and in the process it was incredible. We had one woman who had been on the streets for 12 years out on State Street, and when she got in the car with my staff person Kirsten, she just started crying and said she doesn't remember the last time someone transported her anywhere. She doesn't remember the last time she'd been in a car. We had individuals that came in that had their own unit and they could just move right in, and one individual put all their stuff outside and said, I want to start clean, I'm going to take a shower, I'm going to wash my clothes, I don't want to go into my beautiful space without being able to do those things and do them safely. So that program's been incredibly successful, and we are currently at full capacity. We have a very long wait list for that program, and we already have moved 3 individuals from that location into housing. 2 more have vouchers that we're working on to get them into housing, which is great outcomes for a very short period of time with it. Individuals can stay there for up to 12 months. So the next slide shows just, really what the projection, what is happening in Santa Barbara County. So this is based on the 2022 point in time count. For those of you that may or may not know, there's a certain day in January that is selected by the county, approved by HUD, and individuals that are sheltered and unsheltered are counted at that time as a point in time count of what it looks like, the homeless situation looks like in the county. So you can see that, unfortunately, it's been on the rise through the pandemic. In 2019, there was 1,803 individuals that were counted countywide. In 2020, it was 1,897. And then we had a slight uptick in 2022 with 1,962. So the next slide. The question is, what does that mean for Santa Barbara? And in Santa Barbara, you'll see the arrow. It's 822 of those individuals are within the Santa Barbara region, within Santa Barbara city limits. And it's incredible. It's a big task to think about, how do we get individuals from homelessness to housing? And our focus is always, to help one person at a time. Of course, we help multiple people at a time, but if we can get one person at a time or their family out of homelessness, then we've accomplished something. And so one of the biggest things I think to know about homelessness and the service providers in Santa Barbara County is that we all work together. We have to work together to be successful. None of us can have the one solution by ourselves by any means. So on the next two slides, I'm going to tell you stories of some of the clients that we've served, and they have given us approval to tell their story. So we'll start with Tabitha. Tabitha is currently at Dignity Moves, and I'm going to tell her story in her voice because that's how she wanted me to tell it. So this is Tabitha, and this is how she tells her story. She said, "I spent many years homeless on the streets and sleeping in my car with my dog, while desperately looking for work and trying to get myself out of the living situation I was in. My number one goal was to change my situation and provide a better life for myself and my dog. I always wanted to be able to achieve this independently. There were many times I felt like giving up because I would try over and over again with no results. And one day I went to go visit a friend at the beach and I ran into an outreach worker, Michael from CityNet. Michael told me everything he could help me with and made me a priority in his work. I was able to move out of my van and into Dignity Moves. I finally found a place that felt like home. I am currently the closing manager at the 99-cent store and have been there for over a year now. I feel good going to work every day and knowing I have a safe place to lay my head at night. It was hard having to give my dog over to a foster family, but I know it was the best thing for her at the time. And now I can safely say we both have a place to call home. I recently received my Section 8 voucher from the Housing Authority. I work closely with Jerry Ann, the on-site case manager at Dignity Moves, and Tiffany from the Housing Authority to make sure that I have all my documents and paperwork ready for the next chapter of my life. As I reflect on where I was and where I am now, I know this is only the beginning. With the right help and right support, I am able to grow. All thanks to God, myself, and the guidance from the Dignity Move staff." And she's doing really great. And so we're hoping that she's going to move to housing pretty quickly here. She's really close. She already has a voucher. And so we're all really wrapping those services around her to get her there. So the next slide. It's one of my favorite pictures. So this is Jan. And her story, Jan was born and raised outside of Nashville, Tennessee. She had 3 brothers and a mother who was a factory worker. And she said, "We had a pretty good life growing up, and I had a lot of stepdads, if you know what I mean." That's true, that's what she said. So growing up, Jan was a natural artist, and she ended up at the Tennessee State University to study design. And after an art degree and her ever-growing itch to travel, Jan set out to see the world. She said, "I was a free spirit, always taking off and just going." Along her journey to find herself, Jan found the bottom of a bottle and began to drink quite heavily. After some dark times and struggling with alcoholism for a number of years, Jan found Alcoholics Anonymous and was able to get sober at the age of 28. One day, Jan took out her map while traveling and pointed her finger blindly, and she said, "I was going to go wherever my finger landed," and it landed on Santa Barbara, California. And even though Jan was sober, her life was still a battle. Jan was alone and on the streets for 12 years in Santa Barbara. "I couldn't make the changes I needed by myself. I wasn't enough," she said. So Jan found herself in a deep depression and was diagnosed with major depressive disorder. Jan spent her days isolating in her van that was her home. It was her everything. And she said, "All I ever wanted was security, safety, and peace." And Jan knew she needed a home and wanted to get off the streets. And for Jan, this seemed almost impossible. Finally, in early 2020, Jan met Cora from New Beginnings, who helped her get enrolled in their street parking program. And with Jan's disabling conditions, Cora advocated for her to receive an EHV voucher and supportive services, like what I had mentioned prior, through Good Samaritan Shelter. And Jan was housed in 2021 with her rescue dog, Olivia. And it was the first time in my life I felt at home, she said. Since receiving her voucher and wonderful little home, Jan has been able to get all of her mental health and medical needs addressed. Jan is thriving and enjoying her life most every day now. And Jan even started painting again from her colorful little desk positioned neatly next to her bedside with Olivia at her feet. So the next slide. So I think that one of the biggest messages that we try and send out is to just remember that the person that is experiencing homelessness or their family or the individual that you see on the street, they're really somebody. They started as somebody's daughter, somebody's mother, somebody's cousin, somebody's sister, somebody's aunt. And our job is really to try and get them back to the person that they were and be able to help them be able to be independent. Oftentimes it is reconnecting them to their children or reconnecting them to their parents or their aunt. Reunification is really important, but many of these individuals have no support. For the individuals I mentioned prior, the 10 that passed away, there was no one to call to be able to let them know that their loved one had passed away. My staff have really been that person, and so are the providers here. It's just really important to know that they are somebody, and they deserve that, and they deserve the opportunity to get back on their feet and get their life together and have a safe home. So that message is really important to just remember, that is that they didn't start like this. This isn't how their life started, but this is where they've come to, and they're ready for the next journey, and they sometimes just need a little bit of help to get there. So the next slide. So really the question is always, how can you help, right? And that's even hard to say to the Women's Fund, who has been so gracious in funding programs like Dignity Moves and Noah's Anchorage and all the programs that are here, and SB Act. But there's so many things you as an individual can do. Thoughts are like, we're always looking for hygiene kits. We always need hygiene kits for our programs, even for outreach individuals that are living on the streets. Meals for the shelter programs, for individuals to come in and provide a special meal is a great idea. Stockings for shelter clients, and then even stockings for those that are in outreach or living in their homes. Many of these individuals, getting into homes is not enough. Our staff report that they open the fridge and there's nothing in there because their income is zero. And so we try and coordinate food donations. We work with the food bank. We work with Veggie Rescue to just try and get some basics in there so that they can, not go hungry while they're, housed as well. Gift cards in small denominations for fast food or Starbucks. Even volunteering in many of the programs is an option. And then always household items, like we can always use towels, pillows, blankets. But I just want to thank the Women's Fund for everything that you've done for the system and for the programs. Donating to Dignity Moves and being able to really make a difference for the program that we're working in partnership with has just been incredible to see their stories and really see how safe they feel and how they're able to rest. They're very tired from being on the streets all these years, and it's just such a gift. So thank you so much, and I'm honored to be here, and I will pass it on. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Hello, I am Linda Burrows with the Educational Events Committee, and I am honored to introduce each of today's additional expert presenters who graciously served on the planning team to both guide and create today's important forum. Thank you so much to Silvia Barnard for serving as the keynote speaker. It's such a complex problem, and everyone was hoping that you would be able to do this, so thank you, and the passion and the heart that you bring to all that you do. I also want just briefly to give a special thanks to Carol McElhaney, who has been a longtime sponsor of the Grants in Action and other educational programs of the Women's Fund, as well as all our business sponsors listed in the program. It is my honor to first introduce Jennifer Heinen-Stifler. She is the Chief Operating Officer for Channel Islands YMCA. She has proudly served the YMCA movement for 19 years and believes passionately in the Y's mission of youth development, healthy living, and social responsibility. In 2019, Jennifer assumed her current role as the COO and leads operations across all programs and locations in the Y's 7 service areas. Jennifer considers herself a lifelong learner with degrees in psychology, human development, and child and adolescent development. She enjoys implementing impactful programs for community change and reinforcing the Y's focus on cause-driven leadership. Please welcome Jennifer Heinen-Stifler.
The Channel Islands Y has been serving our community here for 135 years, and we serve over 30,000 people on an annual basis through all of our programs in youth development, healthy living, and social responsibility. As you can imagine, the YMCA is known for a variety of programs, everything from swim lessons to health and wellness programs for cancer survivors. But we also have a social service branch of our YMCA called Youth and Family Services, where we serve hundreds of youth every year who are in crisis, homeless, or at risk of homelessness. And tonight we're here to showcase those programs for you. And I'd like to show you a video about our services.
When we think of home, we think of a bed, a desk, a couch, and many other things that can easily be taken for granted. It's not surprising that some of us forget that even our community is part of our home. We buy groceries from local stores, go to movies, and attend church in our home community. But there's some of us who don't have these comforts. I'm Jennifer Heinen-Stifler, and I'm the Chief Operations Officer of the Channel Islands YMCA Youth and Family Services. As a charitable organization, Youth and Family Services is on the front lines supporting vulnerable youth throughout Santa Barbara County. Youth and Family Services brings the mission of the Y to teens and young adults in the community. Nestled in downtown Santa Barbara is our Noah's Anchorage Youth Shelter for runaway, homeless, and youth in crisis. The newly renovated 8-bed shelter provides a welcome respite for many of our youth aged 12 to 18. Noah's Anchorage operates 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Youth can expect a range of free support services, including housing, counseling, food, clothing, and other basic needs. Our newest location, also located in downtown Santa Barbara, is our Street Outreach Center. Street Outreach is focused on youth 18 to 24 years old who are experiencing or at risk of homelessness. Staff provide vital resources like food, basic hygiene supplies, clothing, and even counseling services. Our drop-in center is open daily, where many youth can come and clean their clothing, utilize internet services, and keep in touch with other vital support services. Beyond the immediate support from Street Outreach, vulnerable youth can also find housing solutions through our My Home program. Staff work with youth to help provide independence and housing solutions. Through partnerships with the City of Santa Barbara Housing Authority and County Child Welfare Services, My Home staff place youth in improved living situations so they have a better chance at a productive future. The YMCA is dedicated to making youth in our community feel at home. Through our support from Noah's Anchorage to our Haley Street Center, vulnerable youth have an opportunity to gain independence and flourish.
Next, it is my honor to introduce Jack Lawrence, the Vice President of Development of Dignity Moves. He has dedicated the last 20 years to social justice work. Prior to joining Dignity Moves, Jack worked in Los Angeles as the Deputy Director of Programs and Development for Equality, California, and as the Director of Development and Communications with the Alliance for Housing and Healing, and as the Executive Director of the Gatekeeper Foundation. Jack is known for his exemplary leadership and expertise in development, communications, and public policy. He is also known as an innovative creator with a storied capacity to bring projects to fruition, both on time and on budget. He received both his BA and a Master's of Arts summa cum laude from California State University, Northridge. Please welcome to the stage, Jack Lawrence.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am so honored and touched to be here. I can't even tell you what the Women's Fund means to Dignity Moves. Silvia shared a little bit. The Women's Fund gave Dignity Moves a $75,000 grant, and that $75,000 we were able to construct 3 units on our Dignity Moves site on Santa Barbara Street. And they are 3 of the most important buildings on that site. It's the case manager office, it's the social service office, and it's the clinic. And those are the reasons that we're able to do the kind of work that Silvia provides for us. Silvia and Good Samaritan Shelter are what I call the secret sauce. There's no way that we could do what we do. We know, Silvia was talking about how we all work together. What we at Dignity Moves know how to do is raise money and build structures. We don't know how to take care of people. Silvia knows how to take care of people. The county knows how to help us. So All three of the organizations have been working really well together. I'm so proud to be a part of an organization that has figured out a way to marry public, private, and social services and produce the results that we've produced. I can't even begin to tell you how exciting it is for us. I also want to, who are the, is there any research, any of the folks, ladies from the research committee here? You don't want to raise your hands because you know how hard you make it on us, don't you? I do want to thank the research committee, and I've shared this with many of you. Dignity Moves, when we came to you looking for help, was just an idea. We didn't have any proof of concept. We didn't even have our 501c3 status. But what we had was a dream and a vision that you believed in. And because you believed in it, the site has become a reality. And not only has that reality flourishing, but as you'll see in the video, because of the work that we were able to do at the Santa Barbara Street site, we're now going to be building another 300 units here in Santa Barbara County. Yeah. And I'm here to tell you it's a direct result of the Women's Fund. There's no two ways. We would never have been able to provide the care and the construction that we have provided without the Women's Fund. It has been immeasurable. And it's also because those research ladies are so rough that everybody else that followed behind you was like, oh, if the Women's Fund gave the money, it's good enough for us. And so I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for all of the incredible support. I've had the great gift of touring many of you in the sites recently. If any of you would like to come see the site, I would be happy to give you a tour. Just connect with me. My information is on the program. And I would like to show you a video that one of our local board member, Aaron Eidelheit, has narrated for us. Thank you.
So what's so exciting about what's going on in Santa Barbara is Santa Barbara is a microcosm for everything that's going on in California. How do you address homelessness in a fast and efficient manner, but that's also dignified? Dignity Moves is a big tent approach. It's partnering with key stakeholders that involves philanthropists, government, nonprofit, faith-based communities, volunteers, and businesses all coming together to provide a community approach. And by utilizing county-owned land that is temporarily borrowed for 3 years, we get the land for free, the county self-permitted in 7 days, which means from start to finish, we ordered the units and housed people in 9 months. And because the cost of construction is so low by factory-built housing units, the all-in cost was $50,000 a unit. When Good Samaritan started the outreach to bring people in off the streets to live here, they started collecting names of who would want to live here and eventually had to cut the waiting list off at 150. Dignity Moves addresses the barriers that stops people experiencing homelessness from coming in off the streets. And they do that by having their own unit that they can lock. Storage. They can bring in pets. They can bring in partners. And it's quiet and safe. By having their own private home, by having their own private shower and bathroom, by having laundry, they're able to return to a dignified life like we all live. When you take someone who's been unsheltered and you bring them into a dignified, quiet, safe place, and you surround them with supportive services, you enable them to start to think about moving on to more permanent, stable housing. People can get jobs. 11 of the 33 people who have moved into Dignity Moves in just a few short months have gotten jobs. That's a third of the people here. and then they can transition, they can be reconnected to family and friends, they can find other lower cost destinations to live, they can be connected to more permanent, stable housing. And that is the goal of Dignity Moves. And so what's exciting is we now have a proof case. And this proof case is that we built these units in 9 months for $50,000 a unit, and we're housing people. People are getting jobs. People are already moving on to more permanent, stable housing. And now we have the opportunity to go big. With our partners in the Santa Barbara County government, we've identified 4 new sites that is underutilized or excess land that are great candidates to build more Dignity Moves units, so that next year we could go from 33 units this year to 300 plus next year. Those units will be in the North County and Santa Maria and here in Santa Barbara, so we're addressing where the need is. So if you can build units affordably, quickly, and get people off the streets, why is anyone living on the streets? Why are we allowing this to happen?
Unfortunately, Rich Sander, founder and executive director of SB ACT, Santa Barbara Alliance for Community Transformation, called this morning with news that he's ill. I wish him a very speedy recovery. And sorry, not that he couldn't be here today, but Rich's colleague, Landon Rank, who also served on the planning team for this forum, is stepping in today. Landon Rank serves as SB ACT's operations manager. In Landon's role, he oversees the operations, budgets, finances, project management, communications, marketing, contracting, reporting, data management, and more for SB ACT. People are so multi-talented anyway. He also manages a variety of projects supporting those experiencing homelessness and those at risk of homelessness, including a literature review and stakeholder interview project to identify the best practices for supportive housing and a city-level collaborative response to encampments in fire-prone areas in the city of Goleta. Landon also managed the data collection team for a formal photo voice study, more than 40 one-on-one interviews and focus groups, assessing the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic and the ongoing needs of those experiencing homelessness throughout Santa Barbara County. The operations of a cross-sector food distribution network supporting those experiencing homelessness and those at risk of homelessness throughout South Santa Barbara County, and a project offering legal and supportive services to more than 50 households identified as being at risk of homelessness. A proficient Spanish speaker, Landon has extensive experience working with communities of color and immigrant communities. Landon has facilitated multiple housing, healthcare, and legal advocacy and fundraising campaigns in partnership with immigrant legal service providers, community activists, and faith-based organizations. He currently serves on the 805 Immigrant Coalition Steering Committee alongside service providers, community advocates, and members of the local immigrant community. Landon is a Santa Barbara native and a graduate of San Marcos High School. It's my honor to introduce Landon Rank. Please welcome him to the stage.
Good evening. As you may have guessed from that introduction, we are a very small team, so we all wear a lot of hats. We have a 4-person staff at SB ACT, and so we run a tight ship. But I do bring greetings from Rich Sander. He is really sad not to be here tonight. But on behalf of our entire team, we just want to express so much gratitude to the Women's Fund. We received a $100,000 grant from the Women's Fund for the Neighborhood Navigation Centers. And this program, the Neighborhood Navigation Centers, are all about creating flow. We serve as a hub for all of the different kinds of service providers to meet and connect with individuals experiencing homelessness out in the community where they are, so that they can start getting connected to the services they need and ideally start moving along that path towards housing. Through our programming, we've served more than 500 of unduplicated individuals in the city of Santa Barbara in this last year, which from the numbers you can see, we have 822 individuals in the city of Santa Barbara. So we're seeing a lot of these people over the course of the year. 28 individuals who were able to transition into Dignity Moves, partly through connections made with some of the Good Samaritan staff at the Neighborhood Navigation Center sites. So we're really grateful for all the partners we have. And I do want to share, too, that we've been able to leverage this grant from the Women's Fund to receive matching funds from the city of Santa Barbara for this project. So we're incredibly grateful for this opportunity, for all of your support, and we have a video about our project. So I'll take it from there.
Santa Barbara County is known as a coastal haven for those fortunate enough to live there. The county is home for over 440,000 people, according to the 2020 U.S. Census. However, at any given time, more than 1,900 individuals are experiencing homelessness. Amongst these 1,900, 78% reported they were already in SB County when they first became homeless. In other words, they're mostly locals. On average, 30% of people experiencing homelessness in SB County reside in shelters, 35% reside in vehicles, and the other 35% reside outside. Getting housing can be tricky for someone experiencing homelessness. You need proper documentation such as a recent ID and a social security card, which can be difficult to obtain and maintain when you're living on the streets. Aside from that, there is limited housing, long waiting lists, high turnover among service providers working with these populations, and the ever-present possibility of losing possessions or documentation through theft. Due to these complications, individuals often lose faith in the system, which results in service providers or case managers needing to make dozens of touch points before people feel comfortable accepting help and taking steps toward housing. So what can we do to assist the many people experiencing homelessness in Santa Barbara County to move toward housing? One of the key local solutions is the Neighborhood Navigation Centers, or NNCs. Since their inception in 2005, NNCs have developed into an organized network with consistent weekly gatherings. They serve as a one-stop shop for healthcare, showers, mental health services, case management, housing resources, donated clothing, and much more.
I became homeless in December of 2013. My first NNC, it was just the Westmont kids, and I remember the dinners, and it was just the dinners in Doctors Without Walls. Being able to have a real cooked meal that somebody was willing to make for you and say, here you go, felt wonderful.
The goal of the NNCs is to develop trust with people experiencing homelessness. After receiving comforts that provide dignity, such as showers, meals, or conversation with a caring volunteer, people are more likely to accept services from a case manager. The NNCs also serve to help many of the case managers to connect with their clients as an easy, consistent way to find individuals without permanent addresses. NNCs also allow for warm handoffs, where service providers can easily introduce their clients to other service providers in an environment of trust.
Did the NNCs help you to get into housing?
Actually, yes, they did. By working with all the different people and being communicative with all the different people I knew, I moved into housing in August 2019.
There are now multiple NNC sites in various high-impact neighborhoods. These locations include local parks, shelters, and open parking lots. Hundreds of individuals visit the NNCs each month, meaning there are hundreds of consistent touch points for helping move individuals closer to permanent housing. We want to continue and grow these neighborhood navigation centers by adding more services. We also want to increase NNCs to additional sites. We believe this is an effective way to help more individuals move out of homelessness. If we want people off the streets, we need a network of trust throughout our community.
The NNCs have impacted my life wonderfully. With all that has happened to me, I've had a great impact on meeting people, getting to talk, getting more vocal with people, getting to be friends with people. being able to reach and find what I need by having communication with people.
SB Act is immensely grateful for the assistance and partners we have had over the years, and we want to invite you to join us as well. Volunteer at the NNCs. Donate to support our efforts. Homelessness was not caused by a single factor, so it won't be solved with a single solution. It takes a village to help the many individuals out of homelessness. We need your partnership to reduce homelessness together.
Great. Well, it is my honor now to welcome Mary Beth Carty, the moderator for our panel discussion, and the rest of the presenters, but let me give a brief introduction to Mary Beth first, and you can all come on up. Mary Beth Carty is the executive director of the Natalie Orfila Foundation. She spent the prior 15 years in corporate philanthropy, interfacing with hundreds of different nonprofit organizations every year. She previously served as director of grant-funded education programs for the Carpinteria Unified School District for 9 years. Mary Beth's experience in the nonprofit sector spans over 35 years, serving and leading on a number of boards that address community strengthening, education, and social justice. She attended Antioch University and the University of California, Santa Barbara, earning degrees in psychology and liberal studies. We are extremely honored to have Mary Beth Carty serving as the moderator for this panel discussion. Please welcome Mary Beth and Jack Lorenz and Landon Rank and Jennifer Heinen-Stiflin back to the stage.
Thank you, Linda, for the introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for sharing part of your busy holiday season with us. And thanks to our panelists for those beautiful, beautiful introductions. So inspiring. We are excited to learn a little more about the organizations you're representing today. So we're going to have some questions that we've prepared that will enable you to shine a light on what your organizations do best in service to the homeless community. The first round will be directed to you individually, and then we'll have some additional questions we'll ask to the group, and then you'll have an opportunity to address each of those questions through your own personal lens. So we're going to start with Landon, SB Act. We learned a little bit about the Neighborhood Navigation Centers, or NNCs, here in Santa Barbara, which SB Act piloted, bringing together public, private, and nonprofit entities in a way that we haven't seen before. How did such a large-scale partnering come about? And also, what's innovative about that model? How does it depart from traditional offerings?
So this all came about over the course of many years. This actually started in 2005 with Rich Sander, and then some of you may know the name Jeff Schaefer. They initiated this together with just bringing spaghetti to a local park and getting to know the individuals there. And then over the course of that, started partnering with more faith communities, with student associations from the local colleges and universities, and then ultimately bringing in service providers. And then in 2020 is when this really became a formal site that was designated, or a formal project designated by the city of Santa Barbara. And so what we like to claim as what's innovative about this is that SB Act serves as sort of this neutral convener. We have no stake in this other than we just want to make it as easy as possible for all the service providers to be able to connect with individuals so that we can help those individuals move out of homelessness as quickly as possible. So we come in as this neutral party. The only thing we do is we serve as the hub for all of this to happen. The other thing that we like about this Neighborhood Navigation Center model is that we try to offer these sites in places where individuals already are, so we're going to them. And then we're able to have that safety built in where the individuals already are comfortable in that setting, and they're more likely to be more receptive to services. So,
thank you. Can you lift up some of the partners that you're seeing on a weekly basis and give us a little bit of information on the 3 sites that are currently in existence?
So 2 of the partners are here on the stage. We do see staff from Good Samaritan and Dignity Moves, as well as staff from Noah's Anchorage, which is a part of the Youth and Family Services. We'll often frequent our sites to connect with individuals there. We also work with Showers of Blessing, who I know the Women's Fund is very familiar with, CityNet. Actually, through this particular grant with the Women's Fund, we've been able to increase the services of CityNet as well as the public library's mobile library services to offer more job skills, workforce development, and so I can't remember the second part of your question.
Just the 3 sites that are in operation right now.
So the 3 sites are, we operate at the Carrillo Castillo commuter lot on Tuesdays, on Wednesdays at the Santa Barbara Rescue Mission in their outdoor patio, and then on Thursday evenings at Alameda Park.
Thank you, Landon. All this through the power of partnerships. Jennifer, this question is for you, Channel Islands Channel Islands YMCA Youth and Family Service Division. Can you tell us about the young people you are serving, specifically through the Women's Fund granted project of the Drop-In Center? I'm imagining that there's unique considerations and concerns in serving homeless youth. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. Oh, it's on. It's on. So I have a 9-year-old at home, and he does my tech for me. So that was surprising that it came on. So at Youth and Family Services, our focus is youth, age 12 to 24 years of age. We focus on youth who are in crisis, youth who are homeless, youth who are at risk of homelessness. And if it's okay, I think a lot of times you learn best through some storytelling. And I brought two testimonials kind of today. First is Rachel. She's 17 years old. She came to us this spring. She was picked up by law enforcement. She had fled her home due to some allegations of abuse, and she was brought to our shelter. We worked with her at our shelter, provided mental health services, family counseling, and more. Quickly, during the process of working with the family, it was determined by the family that she was not going to be able to return home, and it also probably wasn't in her best interest to return home. We were able to set her up with extended family, and who would see her through her graduation date this summer. We continued case management with her, and shortly after graduation, about 2 weeks after graduation, her 18th birthday, she started classes at City College. We were able to help her move into a studio apartment, and she got her first full-time job. Another one, just to showcase the youth we serve, Maya, who was about 20 years old. Prior to the pandemic, Maya was learning, thriving. She was attending City College. She had a full-time job in a restaurant. She was living with 4 other young women in Santa Barbara. And then the pandemic struck. And as their lease term came up, the other 4 girls went home to their families. And unfortunately, Maya did not have a home to return to. She didn't have extended family. Her mother was an addict, and Maya left that situation and was unable to return. And then her job became, her paychecks became infrequent due to the nature of the pandemic, and shortly she became homeless. She couch surfed, and she was living out of her car. She came into our street outreach center looking for supplies, toiletries. She wanted to do her laundry. At first, we didn't know her situation or her circumstance, and slowly, through the relationships we build, she came and shared her story. We were able to place her in housing within about 4 to 5 weeks. She continued school, and she continued her employment. So just some wonderful recent success stories that we've had. You know, I think some of the success we find in serving youth is just our low barrier entry points. There's no obligation, there's no fees, there's not a lot of paperwork, and we let youth lead the way. Sometimes we have youth come into our facility because they heard about it from a friend and they needed some bus tokens or they needed a shower. And we might see them a few days later and they decide they want to start some serious services. Other times we may never see them again. Other times it takes a few months. But I think it's important to meet youth where they are. You know, no youth wants to be homeless. No youth wants to be on the street. And if you can imagine what you were doing when you were 16, 17, 18 years old, you were doing everything you could to fit in with your friends, have a social life, and these youth do the same thing. Youth don't present themselves the same way that some adults do. They really take great efforts to try and hide their homelessness. And so it's really our job at the YMCA to ensure that we're working with partners and other providers to find those youth and support them.
Thank you. Where and how would you connect youth with housing in this area? What are the options?
Yeah, so sometimes it happens through private landlords, and we're able to use a government subsidy to help get them into housing. But most of the time, it's through partners. It's through the Housing Authority, it's through the Turner Foundation, it's working with other agencies who have the physical beds where we do the casework.
Thank you. Once again, I think we have a theme here on partnerships. Let me flip my page. Okay, Jack, this is for you. We know that COVID has changed the landscape of housing the homeless in terms of addressing this issue, and in large part by creating an urgency to find non-congregate living solutions. What has been the most significant change in the way communities are addressing homelessness and re-examining and redeploying resources for services and housing options?
I think that COVID revealed two things that we weren't talking about. I think the first thing that it revealed was it pulled back the curtain on just how bad homelessness was. Because before COVID, many cities, municipalities had ordinances that prevented homeless folks from leaving their tents up during the day. So the tents came down in the morning, so when you were on your way to work, you didn't see all the tents on the street. And when COVID hit, not only did they allow you to keep the tents up, they encouraged folks to keep the tents up. And so we began to see these massive tent encampments. People weren't being evicted from their homes. We were just finally seeing them. You know, especially in California, there's an eviction moratorium. So, you know, Sylvia was showing the numbers. The numbers did not go up that substantially during COVID. That's because there's an eviction moratorium. What it did was it revealed how incredibly deep the problem was. And then I think the other thing that it revealed was that shelters don't work because people were getting infected at extremely high rates. It's really interesting. Homeless folks who were in tents got infected at a much lower rate of COVID than folks in the congregate shelters because the virus spread so quickly in the shelters. So you had a situation where there were a lot of shelters that were not accepting people who had outbreaks, and the only place for people to go were those tents. So Dignity Moves had always believed, and we're a very new organization, but we had come to the conclusion very early on that dignity and privacy were the number one thing that we needed to offer people to get them to accept help. And I think that probably my co-panelists here would have to, I would think would agree that dignity and privacy is the most important thing that all these folks need more than anything else. And I think that because of that, we were able to get people to start to understand that the individual units, our units are not that large, they're 8 by 8. They're nothing grand, but I'm here to tell you they are like palaces to the folks who have been sleeping on the streets for 8, 10, and 12 years. Like Sylvia said, there was that one woman who, and I had heard that she was like, she stood there and they thought she wasn't going to accept the help. They thought, oh no, we've worked really hard to get her here, now she's not going to go in. Well, she was stunned at how beautiful the unit was. And then she went and took a shower, she cleaned her clothes. I think one of the other things that I found that COVID has done is it has, I think that it softened all of us. I think that all of us got beat up pretty bad, and I think we began to look at those people on the streets in a very different light. I don't meet nearly the resistance, and I don't know about you, but I don't meet nearly the resistance or NIMBYism that we used to meet before COVID, to be perfectly honest with you. So I think COVID did those three things. It pulled back the curtain, it showed us that congregate didn't exist, and I think it created more empathy and understanding of the population.
And I did take you up on that offer to tour the project and was struck by how beautifully appointed these units are. And that might be a good chance for you to talk a little bit about some of the more effective partnerships that Dignity Moves has engaged in.
So for sure, the most important relationship that we have is with Good Samaritan Shelter and Silvia and her team, who have put together just an extraordinary staff on that site. And those of you that have toured, and Landon and I were just talking about how quiet yet joyful the site is. And the partnerships that we've put together, like for example, many of you here actually decorated units. We offer the opportunity a week or two before these communities open for folks who adopt a unit, because the folks that come into these have nothing. They literally have nothing but the clothes on their back. And so folks come in and decorate them. They bring linens, fresh linens, thick towels, slippers, bathrobes, personal hygiene stuff that is so commonplace to all of us, but are just like breathtaking gifts to these people. And so the community really, the faith community really stepped up for us. Congregation B'nai B'rith and the Presbyterian Church here spent hundreds of volunteer hours. I wish you could have been there when all the guys from B'nai B'rith figured out how to put the floors in these units. It was hilarious. Because our contractor had to get out of the way once they decided they knew how to put those floors in. They did not need the construction guy anymore. And there was a lot of yelling, but oh my God, it was so much fun. So the faith-based communities, volunteers, people coming and decorating, Good Samaritan Shelter, Doctors Without Walls, all of the county, the county of Santa Barbara has really made a commitment to addressing this issue in a way that most other counties have not, to be perfectly honest with you. We have communities in San Francisco, Alameda, Rohnert Park, but I'm here to tell you that nothing has compared to the commitment that your county leaders have demonstrated in addressing this issue, for sure.
Thank you, Jack. You mentioned NIMBYism and optics. I think that's one of the unintended consequences of being in a community where there are visual examples of unsheltered folks, and often neighboring community concerns can get in the way of providing services and building housing units for those experiencing homelessness. So I'm going to ask this of all of you: what are the lessons we can take from your experiences for future programs and innovations? And we'll start with you, Landon. Can you talk about the experience of SB Act in setting up neighborhood navigation centers in those 3 sites you described earlier?
Yes. So it really has come down to community education more than anything. Once people understand just how hard it is to really move towards housing and just how many barriers there are in the way, then they start to see, okay, we do need to have spaces for people to be at consistently over time to get those services. I have a story of an individual who showed up to one of the sites, was there to get a meal, and while they're there, they start talking with the library staff, find out that the library staff can help with job services. And so they start working with them on like, what are some job opportunities that I might be able to qualify for? And over time, the library staff is able to help them identify a job with the Postal Service. They apply, they go through the application process. They end up having to go to the East Side Library to complete the long application, and ultimately got a job at the Goleta Post Office. And so this is just an example of, if that individual was already going to be at this site anyway, they were already spending time there, why not help them move along their path? Why not try and actually actively move individuals out of homelessness if they're already going to be at these spaces anyway? So what we do when we start new sites is we'll try and host community forums to make sure the community is well aware of what's going on so that they can express their valid concerns and make sure that we're hearing them too, because the people that live in the neighborhoods know what the issues will be in that community. But then it really becomes a conversation with that community moving forward. Yeah.
Thank you. Jennifer, what has been the WISE experience in addressing youth homelessness?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of what we talked about rings true in regard to partnerships. I also think, one of the challenges I think that we're all having right now, and most organizations are having, our staff, is the staffing crunch. And so it really, at the Y, we really try and pay a lot of attention right now to our staff, in retaining our staff, looking at staff benefits, looking at staff pay, so that we can retain good people. As you can imagine, throughout the pandemic, it's been rough on our staff to have to see this all happen. And they didn't have the luxury of working from home. They didn't have the luxury of telecommuting. They were in our shelter every day, 365 days a year, even with kids who were quarantining in their rooms with COVID. And that's taken a great toll and something that we're really actively working on. And so I think, across all service providers, just the acknowledging the work that our staff do and advocating for staff in this field is so critical right now.
Thank you, Jennifer. Jack, there might have been some surrounding community concerns when the 34-unit project in South Santa Barbara was being built. How did you successfully negotiate those concerns?
Much like Landon said, we held community outreach meetings, and we held them right on the site. I think a lot of the concerns of neighbors are myths, to be perfectly honest with you. I think that, homeless folks have been demonized and criminalized to the point that they're no longer human beings. And so a lot of people come to us with a lot of misinformation about the people that we're going to help. And like Sylvia was talking about, these are somebody's somebody. And so we listen to the concerns. We want to be a good neighbor. We want to provide the best quality service and security. Let's make no mistake. Homelessness is a public safety and a public health issue. Let's not pretend that it's not. It's a very serious public health and public safety issue. But at the same time, these are still people that we need to get off the streets. We need to help them. And so I think that our job at these community events is to make sure that people understand exactly who we're going to be helping and how we're going to be helping them. For those of you, our site is right in downtown Santa Barbara. And what I love is that you can go past it 100 times a day and never even know it's there. And many folks have said to me, like, why don't you have a sign on it? Well, because it's somebody's home, and you wouldn't put a sign on your own home, would you? These are people's homes, and I want them to feel like they're going home. I don't want them feeling like they're going into an institution. And so I think that also helps with the neighbors, because it's just a really pretty white stucco wall. And everybody who's been on the tour knows that I want you to touch the light fixtures on either side of the gate, because Santa Barbara Lighting donated the most beautiful lights. They're really beautiful. If you need outdoor lighting, please go to Santa Barbara Lighting. But I think that that's it. It's correcting the myths and humanizing a population that shouldn't have been dehumanized to begin with. And I think that and I also think, like I said about COVID, I think COVID has softened us in a way that it hadn't before. We're more willing to see, I don't know about anybody here, but I'm more willing to wait in line at a grocery store, in a restaurant. It's just like, life's too short. I'm not going to worry about it anymore. And I'm really grateful for the people that are showing up in those stores. And like she was saying about the staff, people showing up every single day in situations that have been really challenging. I think that it's made a difference in everybody. I think most of the people that we deal with anyway.
Couldn't agree more. Education does open the door to greater understanding, and then compassion can flow from that. I want to give you all a chance to talk about the impact of the Women's Fund grant. What has it enabled your organizations to really do? We'll start with you, Landon.
So using the Women's Fund dollars, we've been able to not only coordinate and establish a third site, which I mentioned the 3 sites earlier, but we've also been able to work with our partners from the public library, as I mentioned. They've been able to work with more than 70 individuals just since July on different job applications, workforce development type projects. And 80% of these individuals have been able to meet their short-term goals with their work with the library. In addition to that, we've been working closely with CityNet, and we've been able to contract with them to offer additional outreach and case management services. And through the neighborhood navigation centers, we've seen more than 30 of the individuals that show up to the neighborhood navigation centers have been able to exit homelessness. And so we're really proud of that. And we know that that's not only because of the neighborhood navigation centers. We know that those staff are out with boots on the ground throughout the week, but we know that we serve as one of the key touch points where they can meet, sit down over a meal together, and have the conversations to move them forward. So.
Jennifer.
Yeah, well, first I just want to thank the Women's Fund for continued support. The YMCA has received a few grants over the last several years to support youth and family services work. In fact, we received a grant to start one of our youth and family services programs, My Home. This year, we were awarded $75,000 to help us open our street navigation center at the Haley Street location. So what was happening prior to this is we were doing street outreach for transitional age youth, which is 18 to 24, during the mornings out of our Noah's Anchorage Youth Shelter. And then in the afternoons, we were going out to community programs and working with youth. It wasn't the best situation for our street outreach program. First, there were times where we were commingling younger children, 12 to 18, with older transitional age youth, which was not ideal. The other thing is we were really restricted because we were trying to serve in our street outreach center in the mornings when those younger children were at school. And so that's when the youth were able to come in, take a shower, do laundry, get casework done, get, basic services, lunches, things. And so it was very restrictive. And so what this grant is going to do is it's going to help us open a permanent transitional age youth location where they can still do all of those things, and there'll be more hours provided and more services provided. And we'll also be able to bring partners on site, which we weren't able to do before in our licensed program. And this grant has helped us leverage other funding. We received a matching gift of $75,000 from another foundation to help us. And so we're just gonna open the most beautiful center, and we're gonna have our opening on January 28th. And of course, you'll all be invited.
Jack.
As I mentioned when I introduced our video, the Women's Fund, with the $75,000 grant that we got, we were able to purchase and construct 3 buildings on the site. And they are as I mentioned, they are 3 of the most important buildings on the site. There's a case manager office, there's a social service office, and there's a clinic. And as I mentioned, there's no way that we could do the kind of work that we do. Good Samaritan could not do the kind of work that they do without space to provide those services. So we can provide housing all day long, but unless we have the services, it's really not going to make it, the numbers are not going to change. So those offices are what really, they're profound. And those of you who have toured the site, they're the very first buildings that you see when you come into the site, and they are by far the most important. Well, maybe the dining room might be a little bit, or well, for me, it would be more important, the dining room. But also, I think, and you know what, when you, in your video, you show the laundry rooms, I don't think people understand how powerful a laundry room is for somebody who's been on the streets. So maybe the Women's Fund would like to fund a laundry room at our next site. What do you think? The women's washing room. I can see it now.
Nikki, I want to pause for a moment and just see if there were any vetted questions from the audience. And we are running short on time, so I'm going to ask a question about sustainability of your programs. If you can just answer it briefly, I think it's a very good question. Sustainability.
I'm grateful to say that because we're mainly just serving as a hub, our overhead is fairly low for this. It's mainly just our staffing and then some basic communications. Beyond that, the service providers, it actually ends up serving as a useful site for them to show up to. So in a way, we're actually helping to make all of our donations to go further, because the service providers are able to use their time more efficiently because they can connect with 20 different people on one day. So.
Great, Jennifer.
Well, at the Y, we have a challenge. So all of our services are free of charge, obviously, and we fundraise annually, all the time, for our operations. And at some of our operations, we're open 24 hours a day, so you can imagine just staffing alone the cost of maintaining some of that. But we have good partners, we have good funders who have been with us. The challenge really is navigating opening new programs and meeting the increased costs that just continue to rise. Staffing costs have just risen exponentially, in addition to just operating costs, gas, electrical, all those things just continue to go up and continue to be a challenge for us. But we work very hard as an organization to keep it all afloat. Oh, sorry, if I can add one more thing. One important thing to mention is that we have other lines of operation, like our health and wellness centers. And in some ways, those do spin off some revenue to help support our organization. So when you belong to the YMCA as a gym member, it also supports the wider community.
So in regards to sustainability for Dignity Moves, one of the when we sat down to put together this structure, we made a commitment that we would not do anything unless we knew that we could fund it and that it would be ongoing. So we work on a model with a borrowed land model. So all of our sites are on properties that are owned by a landlord or a county or a city that is willing to let us use the land for free. We don't pay anything for the land, and the landowner, we work out so that they agree to let us have the site for at least 3 to 5 years. So there's no cost for the land, and then we also won't open up until we know that the social services will be paid for the 3 to 5 years that will be on the site. So we work very hard with the county or the city to make sure that the funding will be there for those sites, so that the land is there and the social services are paid for. And then we've been very fortunate thus far to be able to raise all of the money for all of these units philanthropically. We've worked very hard to commit to not charging any of the cost to the service provider or the county, so we've been raising all the money. I think that's one of the reasons. And to be honest with you, I think that people like to buy things. They like to touch things that they've given their money for. It's hard sometimes for people to understand, and it's really important. Capacity building is, I think, really important, but it's hard for people to touch capacity building. They can touch a building. They can come and see a building that they bought. So I think that I'm blessed as a fundraiser to be able to have something that people can touch and people can tour. And so those are the two things: the land and the services are guaranteed for the period of time that we'll be there. And the other thing is that our units come flat packed like IKEA, 2 giant pallets. But and they get assembled by a couple of guys in a couple of days. But we can pick them up and put them on a flatbed and take them away to move them to the next site. So these units are good for 15 years. Some of the units that are being used in our North County site have a shelf life of 20 years. So, and they're all completely portable. And so that's how the sustainability is working for us.
It's fantastic. In closing, one last question. How can we help? You have a captive audience here, and absent the obvious, cash donations, I know you're constantly in fundraising mode. What else? What else can we do? And thank you, Sylvia kicked off a very nice laundry list of potential ways to help. But is there anything that's just top of mind?
I have a couple. For those of you who are looking for something very low commitment, we have these lovely cards out at the table that we have that have the days and times of the week for the neighborhood navigation centers, as well as all of the service providers that are there. We encourage you to take a stack. I know some people like to have socks or water bottles in their car that they can hand out to individuals at the freeway exits. This is something we'd love to see handed out as well, because we want individuals to know where they can go and get services to help get them there. So that's one. Number two, I would say we are always looking for volunteers. We're always looking for faith communities or community organizations to provide a meal on a regular basis. We're looking for individuals to just come and show up and be a warm and caring presence, because we need that trust to be built in order for people to feel safe enough to accept the services. So we really do encourage you to come check it out.
Similar funding and advocacy are always great. Volunteerism is always needed. We need everything from board members to folks willing to do donation drives at their businesses. Like Lyndon, I would also say just knowing where to point people in the community when they're in a time of need is important, and we have similar cards out there as well. And then I would also just say get involved in different advocacy events. In the month of November, it was National Runaway Month, and so there were various things going on within our community at city councils and things. So just show up for those things, show your support.
I think the most important thing that I've learned in doing work with unhoused folks is to make sure that you acknowledge that they exist. So when you see a homeless person on the street, please look at them. Please acknowledge them. Please say hello. You don't have to give them any money. You don't have to offer them any help, but just acknowledge that they exist. I can't tell you how many times people have told me over and over again, I have become invisible. Nobody sees me anymore. And I think that the difference between not being seen and being acknowledged might be the very thing that somebody needs to accept help that day. So I think that very basic human connection is more important than anything. I do need $18 million. I'm not gonna beat around the bush. I need $18 million to build these 300 units, okay? But if you don't have 18 million, you can acknowledge them with a gentle kindness.
Thank you. I think one of the takeaways will be that we have to remember that every single unsheltered, unhoused occupant, State Street or otherwise, is somebody. Thank you for that, Silvia. And if you're moved to take action, each one of these individuals and organizations, their contact information is readily available on the information table outside. I want to thank you for joining us today. It has been my pleasure to be in conversation with you. I think it's really clear why the Women's Fund awarded the grants, and I'm hopeful that this forum will allow you to enlarge and expand the support that you receive from the community at large. Thank you for your work and your compassion, and happy holidays to everyone.
Well, thank you to all our presenters for providing us deeper understandings of the complexities of addressing homelessness in our communities and the effective and innovative work being brought to bear. The humanitarian work that you all are dedicated to and the compassion and deep knowledge which inform your work and advocacy are beacons. And for all the Women's Fund members here, thank you all so much for attending this forum to hear directly from these outstanding community leaders and organizations. Women's Fund grants create significant impacts. Thank each of you for your membership and for your commitment to changing lives together through the Women's Fund. In the lobby, you will find both a grantees community information table and a Women's Fund membership and volunteer table, both with information on getting involved. Thank you all very much. Thank you all very much. Good evening.